All right, everyone. Welcome back to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today, I have Chief McIntire from Holdrege PD in Nebraska, 26 total years in law enforcement. Welcome to the show, Chief McIntire.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I want to ask you kind of like a funny question, I guess, but what is one thing that you think people would be surprised to know about you?
Well, back in my early days in high school, I used to actually sing solos for music. So,
Okay.
yeah, a little stressful at the time, singing through a whole concert hall full of people that you don't necessarily know, and then your peers. So that was fun.
I love that.
Yeah.
I used to sing. I had a friend and she would play the piano and I would sing, and we were a little duo. We didn't do like big things, but we would do like little, I don't know, like small intimate things, together. And I one time after a talent show was said to be the next Britney Spears.
Wow.
And that obviously did not happen because here we are.
Well, it might be better because her life's not doing very good at the present. So
that's true. That's true.
She could use some wellness.
Yeah, 100%. So do you still sing? Is that something that's still a part of your life, in the car, in the shower?
In the car, in the shower. Oh, yeah, of course. But not publicly, no.
Not in public. Do you think that helped you to be able to speak in public? Like that helped you to be able to get in front of groups? Because that's a big skill that you have to have as a leader, as a chief of police, to be able to get in front of people and talk. Do you think that was a skill that transferred?
It sure did. Because, the nervousness you feel when you're in front of a group of people, that's nothing compares to that. You get the redness in your face and stuff like that. It makes speaking in public a lot easier. So you're just talking. So,
yeah. What tips or tools did you use to be able to kind of calm yourself down and, regulate yourself in those high stress situations? So I do think that this plays into wellness, and, when we get into environments that are scary or intimidating, we have to have those tools to be able to effectively perform. So did you have anything that helped you?
Not at the time. Breathing is a good one now that I've learned. But at the time, I was just kind of like, let's just do it. The anticipation was always the rougher spot. So once you get up there and actually start singing, it's so much easier. You're not thinking about, what could go wrong or all these people. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I am not a public speaker, but I am put in a position in my career to public speak. I've done a lot of keynote speaking at different conferences. And so I've had to learn. And I will say that anticipation is the hardest thing for me. Like if I'm the last presenter of the day and I have to spend the entire day of a conference just white knuckle stressed about whatever's going on or trying to just, tactical breathe throughout the entire day. It's really difficult. I would much rather be first on, just get me on, let's go. And then at the end, you feel better about it.
So so relieved after the fact. So I agree.
What do you think is the best skill that you've learned throughout your career? If you can identify one or two that you've learned that have really taken you far?
Just not being afraid. Just learning that, sometimes you got to do things. You got to do the right thing and just do them. Don't, procrastinate or, you got to do something, just go out and do it. And you feel so much better for doing it. Even in the position I'm now, I thought, well, maybe I'll wait till the next time. I just finally decided, now's the time. Let's do this. So,
and that's hard. I think, again, that takes a lot of courage to say, hey, and, I'm sure there's a lot of different ways we can kind of swing this, but to your point of like maybe procrastinating, maybe not raising your hand for opportunities and finally getting to the point of like, I'm going to miss every shot that I don't take.
Yeah.
And having the courage to step forward and to put yourself out there, even if that means that you fail, even if that means that you don't get that opportunity, still being willing to put yourself out there.
Yeah. And that's a precise point. You miss every shot you don't take. So take that shot And what's the worst that's going to happen is you'll be told no. I remember I applied for a position in a different community for a higher leadership position. At the time, I was a sergeant. And I kind of decided, it's one of those deals like, I really don't care whether I get this or not, but I just want that experience. Mm-hmm. And so I decided I'd take that shot. I didn't get that position, but I felt it changed me because I just realized that it really doesn't, I know it's not the end of the world. You took that shot, you learn from it, and learning from obviously your mistakes or whatever is the best lesson you can have. But if you don't ever take that shot, there's a lot of lessons you'll never learn. So.
Yeah. And I will tell you right now, and, in light of being vulnerable and, being courageous, I have had a lot of no's. I've had a lot of rejection throughout my career. You can imagine, like, I started in this wellness space 9 years ago with law enforcement saying, let's try these things. And so over the last 9 years, I've had a lot of rejection. I've had a lot of no's. I've had a lot of, I don't know how I want to word it. I've had comments, I've had anonymous feedback. I've had a lot of things that build character for sure. But I think the important thing is that for me, it reconnects me to my why and the mission. And it helps to build that resiliency over time. There have been plenty of times in my life, in my career, where I'm like, man, like, should I just quit? Like, right. should I just give up? Like, this is, yeah. And it's so hard. It's so hard to put everything into something. And I'm sure everyone who's listening has had those moments where you feel like you pour everything into your career and you care so much and you want to help, and right. you are constantly, getting that criticism or that rejection. It's very, very hard. And there's definitely been times where I've been like, curled up, like, what right. do I do? But then, after, and I think it's okay to sit with those things. I think it's okay to feel disappointed. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to like have those moments, but like, how, to your point, how do you learn and how do you keep going? And for me, asking myself that question of like, okay, well, why am I doing this? Right. What is the goal? And is the pursuit of achieving that thing worth all of the no's and rejections that you get along the way? And right. so far, my answer has been, yes, it's worth it. And therefore I'm here today. So haven't given up. Right. But it does take a lot of courage. Yeah, it takes a lot of courage. And it takes a lot of resiliency, I think, to keep going, because I'm sure there are a lot of people who, and we can put this in a really simple example, who put their name out there for a promotion and don't get it over and over and over and over again. And how do you keep saying, I'm going to learn and I'm going to keep going, and right. and the pursuit is worth it?
Yeah, it's a rough deal, but just learning from all those no's, and every no you get is almost easier mm-hmm. than the last one. So, like I said, you sit there and you dwell on some of that, your emotions and stuff like that. But, getting past that emotional hurt that you may have, or the feeling of not good enough or stuff like that, you learn that, okay, what can I do better the next time? And knowing that the next time is probably not going to be as bad, but you shot your shot. And so you have nothing to be ashamed of. You did probably more than 90% of the people would do in that situation. So that's a great points there. You just keep thinking, what can I do better? How can I improve myself? And it is worth the goal. There's a goal worth it. And of course it is. If you want to do it to begin with and you put yourself out there, obviously it's a goal that you want to achieve, and there's a reason for that. So yeah.
Failure is necessary for success.
Absolutely.
There isn't a single person that you could name that is like elite, top of their game, that didn't have failures. Oh, yeah. And I love doing research into those things. It actually makes me feel a lot better sometimes. Right. When you look at some of these, you can look at some of the top athletes and like realize that like they've lost games, they've lost Super Bowls, like they've had adversities, they've had struggles, I watch a lot of successful business people. And there's one in particular, I love his story because he's crushing it now. Like he's worth like billions of dollars, like very, very successful. But he had like a moment where he's like, I had zero money. Like I had no more credit on my credit cards and I had to make payroll and I had to pay my people. And I was like, this is it. I'm done, And he told his girlfriend at the time, like, just leave me, like I'm not worth anything. And she's like, I'll sleep under a bridge with you if I have to. And now they're married and they're really successful. But I love hearing those things because it's like, yeah, we need to remind ourselves that every single person in our lives, every single person that we encounter fails, has hardships, has adversities, and the people who are the most successful, every actor, singer, like tons of rejection along the way, and I think that we just see the highlight reels, we just see people at their best. Yeah. And especially with social media, it's really hard because you're like, wow, like they have it so easy. Why do I have it so hard? And I think that if we can continue to share those hardships with other people, I think it'll make it a lot easier for people to take those shots and to put themselves out there because they're going to recognize that like they're not alone in that feeling.
I agree. And one thing you think about, you always hear the one step back, two steps forward. And I see a lot of people with the arrow tattoo. Well, the one thing you got to do before you shoot that arrow is it's got to go backwards, right? Mm-hmm. So in order to go forward, sometimes you have to take that step back or draw back. So with your failures, a lot of times that's the best thing that could ever happen to you because that's what then drives you to move forward and succeed like some of these people. But yeah, you can't think of anyone that hasn't had failure in their life. So, but unfortunately, like you said, the social media aspects we live in now, all you do is you see all these people's highlights. They never show you their worst of times and the hardship they've had. And I've had many failures in my life, and every one of them I've taken a point to learn from that, and then that's pushed me to move forward. Even like with the sergeant thing, I didn't get it initially, and then I got it, and then it just God's will pushed me to where I need to be. So.
I think you have to have belief and conviction again in the mission and in your abilities. But I love that visualization of the arrow. I thought that was really cool. So thank you for that. I know that wellness is something that is a part of the conversation within your organization, and you're really trying to bake it into the culture of what you guys do. When did wellness become a part of the conversation for you guys?
So when I became chief, I thought, and it's kind of been a pushing, obviously, as you probably know, in law enforcement, we're kind of pushing that a lot lately because, some of the old timers like me, we didn't really push that at all when we were, starting in our career growing up, as you might say. But so it's kind of been a real point as of late, and I went to my city administrator and said, hey, these are the kind of things we're seeing. I just wanted, this was the mental wellness, I want to take a look at that. And, there's a lot of officers, a lot of times want to keep things inside and just deal with it that way. And we're learning that's not the best way to do that. So I'm like, well, how do we want to handle this? We're a smaller agency. We don't have a large budget, but we definitely want to take care of our people. So I asked them, can we just treat it like we would like an ankle sprain or you broke a foot or something like that? So, if they need assistance, we'll push that out. They can go see what our counselor want. We'll just treat it as like a workman's, comp claim or something like that. We're going to handle them, do whatever is best for them to get them mentally right. Because, with this profession, you see a lot of things that stay with you. And unfortunately, a lot of times you don't know when those things are going to come back. I could think of many scenarios of things that happened. I was fine at the time. And then months later, years later, it comes back to me. I relive that experience. So I want to give my people the opportunity to be able to walk through that, learn from that. I mean, just the point where you can just talk to someone and really someone that you're not, tied to at all, not with even in the agency, that you can just really share what's deep inside you without anyone judging you or anything like that. So I want to give them that ability to do that. And so we kind of implemented that. We have a dispatcher too. And a lot of people don't realize dispatchers live through that same trauma as well. And sometimes it's more frustrating for them because they don't actually get to see it. They hear it, and then they don't know what happens from there. So they're just sitting here in our room, listening to all this traffic going on. I have no idea what's going on, the outcome. And so we implement for them as well. We've had success with it. We have had a few use that, and I'm very blessed that that has been used. So I hope it just keeps going that way. But state of Nebraska also is great. Our crime commission, it's paid by the state. We do offer, as far as the physical fitness, we offer bonus kind of if you're in shape and you meet these guidelines, just kind of to help people, give them an incentive to work out and stay in shape. Because, it does tie in. It ties together a lot. Just if you're in good physical shape, a lot of times, just being healthier helps you deal with things a lot better.
Yeah.
Makes you feel better. Yeah. So, and it's a win-win for us because, obviously we want to take care of people. We want them to stay. And with mental and physical wellness, they're going to stay longer. They're not going to be sick as often. As an administrator, I'd rather have the guys I have, they're all great. I want them to stay here and make a career out of it and be a good career for them. Not something that's going to set them back on their personal level, but, be something they're proud of and something that, they can deal with and just be proud of.
Yeah.
So.
And I appreciate you mentioning longevity. You want to keep the people who are there, which is retention, of course, and retention is going to be a huge topic. But you said, I want to keep them here for a long time. And I don't want them to be sick, or I don't want them to have injuries, or I don't want them, and when we say that, now we're raising the bar from longevity to quality of life. And I think for a long time, there were a few conversations that I was hearing, and one was longevity. And yes, of course, longevity is important. Like, we want you to live until you're in your 90s, or maybe we can cross 100. Like, longevity is great. But if you're not living well, then what's the point, right? Like, we want to make sure that you live a long and successful career in life, but you still have life left in you. Right. You're not sick, you're not injured, you're not crawling to the finish line, you're power walking to the finish line. How do we raise that bar? And so I appreciate you mentioning that. And I think once we can kind of establish where that bar is, because we have to set wherever that is, in base. Once we can set that bar of okay, longevity, yes, of course, but then quality of life, then what are those things that we have to do to achieve that and to make sure that people are well, that they're living well? And then the other thing that I was hearing a lot, and maybe you can speak to this too, there's a focus right now so much on buy-in and engagement, which of course is important. We want to talk about buy-in, we want to talk about engagement. Funds are limited. If you are providing something that cost money, you want to make sure that people are using it. But can we raise that bar too? Because for me, if 40% of your organization is using something, but they're not benefiting from it, then that's not a success. So how do we raise the bar and say, yes, we want people to take advantage, we want buy-in, we want engagement, we want participation, but can we also make sure that whatever we're doing is effective? If they're using it, are we seeing the results that we're looking for? Are we seeing a decrease in injuries? Are we seeing a decrease in sick time or absenteeism? Are we seeing a reduction in these areas that we hope to? And if not, then how can we get to that place? And so I think that we have to constantly challenge the way that we think and ask ourselves, is there another bar that can be raised? And if so, how do we get there?
That's kind of one of the things you just kind of got to keep experimenting as we go. You kind of set that bar and hopefully, keeps it, and knock on wood, we've been pretty healthy here other than myself, but, other than that, for the most part, we've been doing good. I haven't had anyone super sick or anything like that. So, but yeah, that's something you want to constantly look at and reevaluate year by year. Is there something more I can do as an administrator to, give them incentives to keep working out? And unfortunately, you're always going to have those that are that's just not their thing. So, how do you motivate them? Are you able to, and at what point is that too much, So, but, training, mandatory training that we do, like, I'm sure you heard like Royce Gracie. They have a training now that's been going around for that. I have gentleman that learned that and is a instructor with that for law enforcement. So we just went through that, which, I didn't partake. I had an injury, of course. So, but the rest of the department did partake in that. And so that's one thing that keeps us active. So we try to keep as many actual hands-on type trainings that we can do. I think those are like the best to learn from. It's much better to get hands-on as opposed to learn from a book or to learn in other ways. But if you're actually doing it, it's so much better.
Yeah. It's interesting. I did a conference and it was all chiefs. So we were just all connecting about wellness and we were having just an open dialogue conversation about wellness. And there was a question that came up about, what do you do for your own wellness? What does that look like? And in a room with 40 chiefs, almost everyone was different, and so when we talk about wellness and you said, there's people, it's just not their thing. Yeah. 100%. There's going to be people who they're like, I will not step foot in that gym, but can we identify what is their thing?
Right. Like they go for a walk, that's something,
Yeah. What's your thing? And I had one chief, say, woodworking was like their thing. They're like, that is my decompression time. Like I love woodworking, and it's like, okay, cool. And then there was another time where someone was like knitting or, and so it's like, how can we identify the intricacies of each person? What motivates them? What excites them? What is going to help decompress, and reduce that stress for them? And are there things that we can do? Maybe you can't introduce woodworking on duty, but, there might be certain things that we can start implementing that maybe don't take a lot of effort, right. Maybe don't take a lot of funding. If someone's like, I just really enjoy going for walks, can we facilitate that? Can we, and it just goes back to, knowing your people and talking right. to them and having those conversations. And then are they willing to share that too? Because some people don't want to share those things. But I think when we can understand that wellness is multifaceted, it's not a one size fits all, then we can start to determine, how we can get those people, especially the ones that you're like, yep, not their thing. How can we figure out what that thing is?
Well, that's a great point. Everyone, I think getting people to have hobbies, to break away. And that's something I'll talk about. But you have to have that separation from work, I think. And I think woodworking is a great example. Here, hunting is a huge thing. So with people that want to hunt, fish, or the outdoor stuff, I like to go camping. That'd be a great one. I like to hunt fish. Or, even going to football games or participate in things like that. I think those are all great avenues to kind of break away from that. And so you're not thinking about work, just something that keeps your mind moving and on something. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, for sure. I did want to circle back to, you had mentioned working out and getting in the gym and doing some physical exercise. And I realized that recently I've been having conversations about injury prevention and asking the question of all right, what are we doing in terms of injury prevention? And the response is always, well, everyone's working out. And working out is really effective. We want to make sure we want people to be in shape. We want people to move. Muscle is extremely important for longevity. We want to, make sure that we're, encouraging that. But working out and injury prevention are two separate conversations. Just because someone works out does not mean that that's injury prevention. And you and I talked offline a little bit about this. So I was hoping that we could dive into this injury prevention topic a little bit. And what is your opinion, or what are some of the things that you are seeing as far as, maybe the top injuries, and what are the conversations that you guys are having around injury prevention?
Well, one thing, you talked about, building muscle and stuff like that. But the thing you got to remember also is the soft tissue injuries. So you build muscle, you got to do the stretching. Yoga is great. Yoga is another thing that's great for clearing your mind, stuff like that. So, and then of course, like with me, as you get older, building muscle is not always the best thing anymore. Maintaining that muscle is great, but you don't want to necessarily lift heavy. So just continue to, learn your limits, not overdo it. And, another thing, I buy everyone boots every year. And I just know that, having the proper footwear, because we're on our feet a lot, and you don't want someone wearing horrible boots still because they can't afford them or whatever. So I just think the guys have good shoes that are comfortable, and it's going to get them through the day. It's got the good ankle support and stuff like that. Just promoting the stretching, wearing proper equipment, and basically not overdoing it, and stuff like that. So
yeah,
I think they're huge.
I always tell people, if you don't bend, you break.
Right.
And people usually get on board with that. But it doesn't matter who I work with, if it's someone in the academy or if it's someone in service, whatever, if they're 2 years in, 10 years in, 20 years in, everybody is tight. Nobody, for the most part, is focusing on mobility and flexibility. And that is the key to injury prevention. So when we look at stats, the number one reason for injury, by far, the number one reason for injury in law enforcement is lack of mobility and stability, by far. And so if it's predictable, it's preventable. If we can understand that most injuries are going to be either lack of mobility or stability. What does stability do? It also is associated with tripping and falling, right? And so if you have more stability, you're not going to trip and fall as much, which is one of the top reasons for injuries as well. So if we can take a look at these things, for me, it's like a no-brainer. I'm like, this should be something that we introduce, all across the board, but it's still hard to get people on board with that because people are still used to getting in the gym and lifting heavy. And I was just teaching a class, and I realized this, and this is 9 years in, right? I'm teaching, I'm like mobility, stability, flexibility. And I looked at the class. And I did this with a few groups. I did this with pre-academy, I did this with academy, and I did this with in-service. And I said, do you guys know the difference between mobility and flexibility? Nobody understood the difference. And I was like, wow, okay, there's more education that could be done, obviously on my end. And that's something that now I go and I talk to people about, and mobility is going to be more joint focused. Flexibility is going to be more muscle. Right. And so, you have to have both. And so when we talk about, injury prevention, if you are an agency that is focusing on, gym and working out, great, but we're missing a component, for injury prevention, which is going to be that mobility, stability side of things.
Yeah, I agree. So it's definitely something we need to keep addressing and really hit that home because it's great being strong, but if you get injured, it's a game changer. Like I said, you don't want to be ending up on the ground. For cops to be on the ground is not a good thing. So
yeah, I mean, you can be strong and you can be mobile. I always relate it to sports. You take a look at any professional athlete, they're both. You have some big, strong linebacker dudes out there that are also focusing on mobility and flexibility because the last thing that they want is to have a career-ending injury. Right. They're, first of all, they're too invested, that's their dream to be doing that. And they also make way too much money, right? They want to keep collecting a paycheck, right? Absolutely. And so when we look at this with law enforcement, it's the same, right? You guys love what you do. You want to do it for a long time. The last thing that anyone wants to do is get injured. I would never walk into a briefing and say, how many of you guys want an injury and have someone raise their hand. People might want a day off, some time, to have a vacation, but no one wants an injury. And so when we can look at that and say, hey, these elite athletes are both. They're strong and they're flexible and mobile enough to not have injuries. With how many games and, reps they do, the amount of injuries that we see is small. right? And there's a reason. It's because of their training. So I know that that's something that you're focusing on too. So I appreciate you spending a little bit of time to talk to me and educate the people who are listening, because I think it's still maybe like, kind of a black box or a question mark of, why, and it's not maybe something that's really talked about that much.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to do it. So hopefully, we keep pushing that. And you think, especially the NFL players, you think the teams, those teams are making a huge investment on that player. And they're not just, I'm sure they think of as people as well, but they're making that investment, so they want the best for them. And so we're kind of doing the same thing. The people we hire, you want the best for them, the best outcome, and you don't want them injured. It hurts our department because other people then have to step up. It hurts them and their families. I've been injured a few times, and it's not fun. Being on the sidelines and having to recover and going through all that too. But if you could just do a couple extra steps and doing some extra stretching and whatever else, it takes, just to not have to worry about having an injury, that'd be a great idea. So.
Yeah. Thank you. My final question for you is for the younger generation who are coming into this career today. What words of wisdom would you share with them if you could maybe take all the knowledge that you have now and go back and talk to your younger self?
Well, the biggest thing I can think of is faith and families first. I see it a lot with the younger generation. They're just so gung ho on this career. They just want to live it. And I think it's important that you make sure that you work for your family, and you always got to keep God in your heart as well. So you always want to have that. And then, like we talked about a little bit earlier, you're having those hobbies or the woodworking and stuff like that. Having that break from your job is vital, especially for having a long career. Because if you're keeping that all inside and that just builds up at first you're going to be all involved, but at some point you just have to have that separation to kind of clear your mind of what you've seen and just go about, your life and try to keep them separate. And I would, recommend that you have friends that maybe aren't in your career field. I mean, you're going to have friends that are in your career, but just have a kind of a separate group of friends that you can go, and you don't ever have to really talk about your job. Just be you. Because I found that there's this me, and then there's the other me. Not that we're different people, but just the way I act is a little bit different. When I'm with a group of cops, or I'm with other people. And then, as far as your career, the biggest thing I would say is your integrity is the biggest thing you have. Don't ever lose that. There's nothing worth losing that in your career. You always got to be honest and straightforward. So keep that in mind. The hardest things in life are always usually the best for you. So you got to always do what's right. And a lot of times it's really hard, but in the long run, it's going to be the best, and it's going to make you a better person. So just keep that in mind as well.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you being on here and talking to me and sharing words of wisdom. Of course. Yeah. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, I'll talk to you.